So I think we'll start with then welcome address, Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Preeta Reddy, Executive Vice Chairperson, Apollo Hospitals, Ms. Lavanya Nalli, Executive Chairperson, Nalli Group of Companies, Mr. Arun Renga, CEO, N. Rangarao and Sons, Dr. Nipur Pawan Bank, Indian School of Business, Mr. David Bok, CEO and Family Business Consultant, Family Business Matters, and moderator, Mr. Sanjay Mehta, partner, Surana and Surana International Attorneys. Really, it's giving me great pleasure welcoming all of you for today's webinar, that is Women in Family Business Breaking Barriers. And I have to welcome my own colleagues in Hindustan Chamber of Commerce also, as well as the Surana community members also. It's a great evening. It's going to be a great evening for all of us. And the topic is very really a relevant topic in the present context, because many business enterprises are led by women. In fact, we are all having very good leaders. Actually, this comes from the out of this women empowerment. Women's empowerment is nothing but what process of increasing women's access to control over the strategic life choices that affect them, and access to opportunities that allow them fully to realize their capabilities, otherwise making them to explore their capacities. There are 5 types of empowerment. One is educational, social, economic, political, psychological. Social empowerment might be one of the most prominent forms of empowerment shown in the mainstream media. It strengthens women's social relations and their positions in social structures, giving them more of a purpose outside of the home. For empowering women, 3 things are important. One is equality of access to and attainment of educational qualification necessary if more women are to become agents of change. Literacy of women is an important key to improving health, nutrition, and education in the family, and to empowering women to participate in decision-making society. There are 3 L's of women empowerment, which includes learning, labor, and leadership. Learning helps women to get limitless knowledge, which helps them to broaden their thoughts. It helps women to overcome adversities. According to Mahatma Gandhi, if you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate an entire family. There's a famous African adage: if you educate a boy, you train a man. If you educate a girl, you train a village. Women have always been an important part of the workforce, but there has been a significant shift, arguably a revolution in the range of employment options that are now open to women, and in the critical positions women occupy in many fields. There are also large sectors of economy, including technology and management, which may be perceived as open to women, even though women have slowly but surely gained a solid foothold in these sectors. And these continue to be particular areas of employment STEM fields, for example, that are the focus of policy initiatives aimed at addressing existing inequalities and actively encouraging women to consider educational and career opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So this clearly, my prelude clearly shows that yes, women nowadays, they are taking a very good lead in their career growth as well as in business sector. Today's actual webinar aims at how women are overcoming the various obstacles or various problems and various issues to become the leaders of their own enterprises. Family businesses mainly depends upon the success, what's called succession stories. But in the absence of proper succession stories, the entire business enterprise may collapse. That's why now the need of the hour is that even if women sibling is there, there's a need for her to take over the business and see that the business is continued forever. So with this prelude, I want to leave this floor to the next Mr. I think C.A. Revati Raghunathan to introduce the speakers, moderator.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh, sir, for that really nice welcoming words. I will move on now to introduce Mr. Sanjay Mehta, who's the moderator for this program. He's a partner at Surana and Surana International Attorneys and heads the corporate real estate and infrastructure practice at the firm. He has been with the firm for more than 20 years, and his areas of expertise includes structuring of transactions, drafting of transaction documents, corporate due diligence, corporate compliances, private equity and capital market appraisal and syndication, liaison with fund managers, banks, venture funds, RBI and other regulatory agencies, structuring of complex real estate deals, due diligence on property purchase and leasing of properties. Along with his advising his corporate clients and companies, he also advises the promoters of such companies on succession planning, more so for family-owned businesses, including dispute resolution among family members through negotiations. Apart from his law degree, he has an MBA in finance from the Barrett College, City University of New York. So over to you, Mr. Sanjay, for the next phase of the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, jointly hosted by Hindustan Chamber of Commerce, Chennai, and our law firm, Surana and Surana International Attorneys. This webinar is part of the Family Business Consulting Initiative conducted by our firm on current topics of interest and latest developments in the family business arena. The audience for this series normally includes our clients who form part of the family business we advise, members of the partnering organizations, officers of various regulatory authorities we deal with, our colleagues in office, and budding lawyers who have recently joined us or are following us on social media. I'm grateful to Hindustan Chamber of Commerce and other stakeholders in this domain who are currently collaborating with us for this webinar. I'm informed the audience in this webinar includes large, medium, and small businesses which have been run by families either as first generation or second generation business owners, and who eventually would have to pass on the baton to the next generation. Our aim today is to get people who have been earlier part of successful transition of family businesses, experts who have helped family businesses transition to the next generation, and academicians who study successful families and their businesses to share their perspective with the stakeholders, to answer those nagging questions the business owners would have, and also to take care of doubts that may come up, and eventually help the stakeholders to take an informed decision. Currently, this program is on a Zoom platform, but a curated version of this webinar would be hosted on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn for future references. Now, coming to the main topic of today's webinar, Indian society views the women in family business as mere inheritors, but in reality, they are the backbone, entrepreneurs, founders, and innovators of major successful businesses. Often at times, even though the women are founding members of the enterprises or the company they run, they are forced to step down to take care of family instead of family businesses. Childcare, education, other marital obligations have always been the major reasons imposed by the so-called extended family for women to step down for pursuing their company's legacy. Even among the children, the sons are more exposed to the art of business than the daughters, and under the pretext that the daughters will get married and will not be able to take care of business per se, they are neglected. However, there has been a paradigm shift in the current structure of family businesses, where women have taken over the business of the founders. We have a very live example among our panelists themselves, the Apollo family, where the Reddy sisters are currently running the entire operations, not only in India, but across the globe. with access to better education, international exposure, availability of latest technology, and also change in laws, women have taken control of many businesses. Then there are those new startups which have seen women rise to the occasion. Ms. Falguni Nair of Nayak is a very good example. There are many more such successful stories which are happening in India. So now let me quickly introduce the esteemed panelists we have in this webinar. Our members, while many of the panelists are well known and are familiar faces in the audience, but still for those who may not know them, it would be nice if I could kind of, introduce them quickly and move this forward. First, we have Ms. Dr. Preeta Reddy, Executive Vice Chairman, Apollo Hospital. She's yet to join us because she's had some emergency at the hospital. She'll be attending to that and joining us a bit later, but still she's going to be part of our program. Then we have Ms. Lavanya Nalli, Chairperson, Nalli Group of Companies. We have Mr. Arjun Ranga, CEO, N. Ranga Rao and Sons. Dr. Nupur Pavan Bang, Associate Director, Thomas Skid Heine Center for Family Enterprises, Indian School of Business. And last but not least, Mr. David Brock, CEO and Family Business Consultant, Family Business Matters. Now, to give a brief introduction to each of these panelists, Dr. Preeta Reddy is a well-known personality in this part of the world. She's Executive Vice Chairperson of the Apollo Hospitals, Asia's foremost integrated healthcare provider. Apollo Hospital is acclaimed as a pioneer of private healthcare in India and was India's first corporate hospital. She's also the managing trustee of Apollo Hospitals Education Trust, a principal body steering the education endeavors of the group. Dr. Preeta Reddy is widely recognized for her contributions in making high-quality healthcare accessible to millions and for her support to various entities and industry bodies working for the betterment of India. She was conferred the degree of Doctor of Science, honorary causa, by the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University in recognition of her outstanding work in the field of healthcare, committed to serving the underprivileged. She also supports several social projects, including Sachi, Save a Child Heart Initiative. Next, we have Ms. Lavanya Nalli. Ms. Lavanya is the chairperson of Nalli Group, a $100 million national retail chain specializing in textiles, women's ethnic wear. Established in 1928, this iconic heritage brand from South India is a category killer in saris and famous for its Kanchipuram silks. She started her career with Nalli in 2005, focusing on growth and business development, operational excellence, and new business initiatives. Under her stewardship, Nalli also diversified into other businesses and new formats. Lavanya graduated from Harvard Business School with an MBA in 2011 and worked at McKinsey & Company, advising CXOs of Fortune 500 companies on issues ranging from top-line growth, profit improvement, initiatives, change management programs, and multi-channel strategies. She moved to India in 2013 into e-commerce world as vice president at Myntra and is now back with her family firm, Nalli Group, leading a new business initiative. By 2017, Nalli has expanded its footprint to 37 stores across the country. And Economic Times names Lavanya as among India's fastest rising women leaders. She's a frequent speaker at industry events and is an ambassador for the Government of India's innovation efforts and champion of change program. She's a member of YPO and an Aspen Fellow. She's published author of 3 children's books and also is an avid fitness enthusiast. We move on to Mr. Arjun Ranga. Mr. Arjun Ranga is a CEO of N. Ranga Rao and Sons, a group with an humble beginning known for its cycle pure brand agarbattis. N. Ranga Rao and Sons was established in 1948 and is a manufacturer of cycle pure brand agarbatti, India's largest selling agarbatti brand. With an engineering college degree from SJ College of Engineering, Mysore, and an MBA from Thunderbird, USA, Arjun has worked in couple of years before joining the family business in 2000. Through constant innovation and differentiation, N. Ranga Rao and Sons forayed into home care, air care, and recently into spiritual products, further consolidating the leadership position. The group has extensively engaged in philanthropy through the NR Foundation, strongly focusing on education and women empowerment projects. Having spearheaded many initiatives and innovations, Arjun aims to continue to grow his business ethically, collaboratively, and sustainably. Arjun is currently the president of All India Agarbatti Manufacturers Association and the past chair of CII Mysore chapter. We move on to Dr. Nupur Pawan Bang. She is the Associate Director of Thomas Smith Heine Center for Family Enterprises, Indian School of Business, otherwise known as ISB. Born in a small town forming part of Jharkhand now, Dr. Nupur is the first born in her generation in a traditional joint Marwari business family that was once very rich, but not so when she was born. That was due to the sudden demise of her grandfather, who was a patriarch of the group, as there was no one old enough or capable or willing to take over the business. This is one of the things which we will discuss today as what happens if the next generation is not willing to take over the business which you have started. What Nupur researches today as an associate director at Thomas Smith Heine Center for Family Enterprises, she has lived from the day she became aware of her surroundings. Dr. Nupur, through her research and outreach, wants to make it easier for women to succeed, wants more role models like the Reddy sisters of Apollo Group and Lavanya Nalli to show the path for other women to dream, to not give up. Dr. Nupur is a renowned thought leader in family business, is a frequent speaker at industry forums, an astute observer of families in family business, interacting with several business families to understand their challenges, strengths, and best practices. Dr. Nupur is a postdoc fellow from ISB, holds a PhD in finance, and a fellow of Association of Chartered Accountants of UK. She's also authored several research papers, case studies with papers and articles for international publication. Now to the last panelist, Dr. David Brock. David is an international family business consultant with many decades of experience providing guidance and support to family businesses. With a wealth of knowledge and insight into many challenges associated with running family businesses, David provides assistance to family businesses with strategic planning and practical advice. He also offers guidance on necessary steps a family business must take to ensure growth and success. As author, David writes books that detail the steps the family business must take in order to be successful. His handbook, The Little Red Book of Family Business, is a pocket-sized text that offers many of David's wisdoms that touch on several of the most common trials and tribulations typically experienced by family businesses of all types and sizes. David has worked with more than 500 families businesses across the world. He offers consulting as advisory service to families facing difficult issues or requiring assistance dealing with the challenges of running family-owned businesses. Now, let's open up the floor for our discussions with the esteemed panelists. Participants, to start with, you could post your questions in the chat box and our team would create them and direct it to the respective panelists. And at the end of this program, for the last 5 to 10 minutes, we'll open up the entire webinar for live questions which you could ask to the respective panelists you feel like. So let me start off with the 3 panelists who run their businesses. Dr. Preeta, Ms. Lavanya and Arjun, I presume all of you are on board now? Yes, okay. So all 3 of you have at least the second or third generation successfully running your family businesses. It may be in maybe about 2 to 3 minutes, if each of you could give your perspective of the businesses you inherited and how it is run before you guys took over. Maybe Dr. Preeta, if you want to start off first.
Namaste, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and talk to all of you. Our family business is actually a running business. You know, my father, a cardiologist, came back from the US to India. He started off with literally half a consult room, came back with a washing machine and a car, one wife and 4 daughters. And his single-minded devotion to really serve the people of Chennai. I think that's all which mattered to him. So his practice grew, and at one point in the early 80s, he lost a patient who couldn't go to the US in time for a cardiac surgery, and that's what got him thinking to see what is it that we can do in our country to bring healthcare of international standards within the reach of every individual. So that's how it started. A lot of legislation had to be changed, plenty of changes in the way people think, their mindset, putting clinicians together. But I think today the company has grown, and it's not only a hospital provider, but it's really a network of anything which can happen in the healthcare space. And we get patients coming from all over the world. We interact, we teach, we are in the digital space now. That's why I'm a bit tied up also with the board meeting that, we've entered very seriously into the digital space with our Apollo 24/7 initiative. So I think the business has grown, and I haven't really inherited it, by the way. I'm just part of a co-working team, which is our chairman and the 4 of us, and a large group of amazingly talented, clinicians, support staff, and people who really understand the future of where healthcare is going. So, we're a large family. We're a family of 100,000 people, and it's been a superbly exciting journey. I just want to say that, we really have to respect family businesses, that even the largest corporations grew from, the one man, one visionary, and it's grown into a corporation. It may not be a family business now, but it always grew as somebody setting foot to do the right thing. And today, the world's largest 500 family businesses generate 7.28 trillion in revenues. And, that's a sizable amount. And they employ 24.1 million people across 45 different businesses. So these are huge numbers. Also in India, whether it's in the organized space or in the unorganized sector, 79% of the businesses in India are family owned. And, that is something which we really have to respect and to contend with. And the oldest family business, according to data provided, is actually over 100 years old, within our country. Today, as we are celebrating Tata taking over Air India, we must remember that that was also a single man who did it, who grew it. And in a way, Tata Sons, while it's completely professionalized, it started with being family owned. So I think there's a lot to be said for family owned businesses. As women in the family business, which is probably what excites our listeners the most, I'm very fond of saying this, that if Dr. Reddy had a son, we may not have been the women in family businesses because we come from a very traditional Andhra family. But having said that, I know the world has changed, and there is no glass ceiling anymore. And we know that, for us, if the company is important, if the business you're in is important, gender doesn't really matter, because I think we're very well equipped with experience, with education, with just an open-mindedness to, look into the future and work alongside all our people. And, that divide and that gender divide in large businesses doesn't really exist that much anymore. But India as a country has to empower the women even more, because while, there's a certain group of very economically safe and women who've done well for themselves, there's a large multitude of women who are really running, small businesses, or really running literally a mom and pop store. Those are the women who we have to look at, try and empower and do much more for them. the workforce in India, again, in our business, 60% are women, because, healthcare business does have a lot of women as workforce working, and they definitely have to be nurtured, encouraged, empowered, and motivated to do more. And I think as an organization, simply because maybe we're just 4 girls at the helm of affairs, there's a sense of security among the women working within our system. And I hope that the sense of security continues and it can permeate into other industries also. So having said that, I think the future is exciting. I'm very proud to be an Indian. And if there's, we continue to invest and work hard and do whatever we can in the healthcare space.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Preeta. Lavanya, do you want to take that question? Your perspective of business you're taking care of and how it was run before you took over?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Sanjay. I'll try and keep it a little short. Ms. Preeta Reddy was quite eloquent and I think has summed up quite a bit about the state of affairs, both at a national economic level as well as just from a gender level at a societal level as well. My own family is a privately held, privately run, family-run business. I am technically the 5th generation, currently the 3rd. So what that means is my grandfather, who is 82, is still in the business. And if you were to go down to a flagship store in Chennai, you'll still find him there. My dad, who's in his 60s, just entered his 60s, which he doesn't like to be reminded of, is also in the business. And for the first time, it has the siblings in the business, which is my brother and I. And my brother is about 5 years younger than I am. So we've been accidentally, I think, become a business family, but now at least my whole life, that's what my identity and my memories have all been. Because from the early 1900s, we've been in business. Before that, we were weavers, and we still do identify as those from the weaving community. But along the lines, even though we were weavers and we have stayed true to our roots in the pursuit of, the product line and the business that we've chosen, it's much more a family in business. So I like to call it that. As opposed to a family business, it really is, I think, the way that all of the children are raised, the siblings, and especially for my generation and the ones coming up now, there's a lot of indoctrination by the elders and a very inorganic way of understanding and valuing the family values. And the business values and the family values are very distinct, but very in sync. And so I think I'd like to consider myself as part of a family in business. And I worked for quite a few years outside the business and came back into it. How has the, so I'll give you a little interesting anecdote and then I'll pass it over and we can always come back to it in the discussion. I'm the first woman in the business, and I was the first woman in the business. My aunt has also joined in the business, and now, of course, it's very commonplace in 2022. But when I joined in 2005, there was technically only 2 women in the whole company, my father's secretary, and then there was me. And this is all the more remarkable because it's our whole business is predicated on selling saris, a garment made almost exclusively for women and to women. And yet the way that the business had run till that time was that it just got passed on from the first son to the first son. It was almost sort of unquestioned rule. And when I joined, what that meant for me was I was viewed, and this is something that I say, as with a certain indulgence. Okay, let her do. What's the worst she could do? As opposed to the expectation. So pros and cons there. When my brother joined the business, I could see there were a lot of pros because he was expected to join the business and there was a lot of support. But at the same time, the cons is that there is a lot of pressure. And in my case, it was the flip of it. There was a very neutral or slight resistance to my joining the business, but it was tolerated and it was seen as an indulgence. Okay, let her do it. Let's see. But one of the benefits of that was that I could really understand the business and get into it without being under the microscope, without having a certain pressure. And I think that has really gone into broadening my perspective and my leadership skill set. And especially after that, the education outside and working in a couple of different businesses outside, it really rounded out my skill set to be able to re-enter the family business and with a much clearer idea and be able to take this into the next generation and into the next phase of growth that I'm very excited about. So more on that later. And I think with that, I'll pause here.
Thank you, Lavanya. Arjun, if you want to just quickly tell.
Yeah, thank you so much. Firstly, it's an honor to be among such distinguished people. Especially, my wedding shopping I did in Nalli, and there's not a moment that goes by when I don't call somebody at Apollo for help, at least the past couple of years. So thank you, both of you, for being part of our lives so much. Right, our family business started in 1948. My grandfather is a true entrepreneur in the business, comes from a very humble beginning, Madurai district in a village called Vatraipu. Life was a struggle. 1920, he lost his father. He had to struggle taking care of his mother, grandmother, got a job in Arvangad in cordite factory, moved there, then moved to Coorg where he got a job again. 1947, around the time India got independence, he wanted to start something on his own. Whole family moved to Mysore, just 100 rupees of savings, started our business selling agarbattis. Understood that you need a core competence to build a business, and so started fragrance creation. So I'm a perfumer as well. One of our key differentiators is that we create all our fragrances in-house. Then he said to sell any product, we need a brand. And he came up with the word cycle in 1950 because a cycle is called a cycle anywhere in the country, any language, any culture. And that's how it started. The second generation of the business, that's my dad and uncles, joined the business from 1958 onwards. A lot of sacrifices throughout, just like how it was in the earlier generations. But always the family encouraged us to partake in the business. We were a joint family, almost 40 of us living in one house. So all dining room discussions would be about business. So we all learned a lot growing up. Sisters were never thought to be part of the business, but wealth creation kept happening for them. But in our generation, our sisters were never actually groomed to be part of business. All of us young boys, we are 5 of us cousins. We all got the best education. We traveled abroad, got our MBAs there, worked outside. I joined the business in the year 2000. And I think one of the unique things that our family did is the second generation stepped up and stepped out the moment we started coming in. It's just not about giving us business rights. They also started transferring shareholding. Can you imagine my dad completely going down to just 4% in the company in a matter of 8 years? And the second generation completely took a back foot and transferred complete shareholding on to the next generation that came in and gave us complete independence to run the businesses. And we made a lot of changes as well. We at least included our sisters to back into shareholding now. So they also have a minor share in the business across. And one big change that we have brought about is in the next generation, all kids are equal. Our daughters and our sons are going to be the same. We will try to groom all of them. Maybe not as well as our parents did, but at least we'll give it a best shot and see how we can inspire them to come back and join our businesses as well. So we're trying to get them educated. Karan and Dia were the eldest now. One is 19, one is 18. They're on their own path. Dia wants to get into design. She's in Parsons School of Design in New York. Karan is into liberal arts and photography. So it'll be difficult to get them back to selling agarbattis, but I'm sure we'll find a way eventually. But that's our journey so far. So we are, doing a lot of rights, and I think India is set for a great future going forward. And I think our generation and forward, I don't think we see gender as a challenge, but I completely agree that in the heatherland of the country, it's still an issue where you need family support. There's a role that the women play in the family, and also you need them to sustain and perpetuate the family business, and also the role that they can play in building businesses as well. So that's my 2 bits. Sanjay, you're on mute.
Okay, so Arjun, while ownership started getting transferred to women, folks, and family, are they started taking day-to-day operations also? Have they started taking part in that?
No, we're talking about our sisters right now. So they are not part of the business, but they will have part of the business, but not part of management. It was not the case in the earlier generations, but we're trying to do whatever best we can. So sisters will be part of the growth journey of the family as well going forward. My sister, that is, and my cousin sisters, which wasn't the case just 5 years ago. So we moved from a partnership to a private limited and created a new trust structure where they become part of the journey.
So again, same question to Ms. Preeta and Ms. Lavanya. Okay, for Dr. Preeta, at least all her sisters are part of it, but she did make a statement saying that, if she had a brother, then it would have been a little different. But for you, Lavanya, do you think your aunt has also taken part in the day-to-day operations, or it is still you and maybe looking down somewhere?
She is. I mean, she joined a little. So like I said, I joined in 2005. At that point in time, I was the first. And then she joined later. She started her own business, of course, with the guidance and support of the family and so on. But then she started it, registered it, started it for herself and, for her children. My father, when it came to my brother and I, and of course, the company has a few different entities. When he introduced us both when he imbibed us both into the business, he gave us both equal equity. So there is a certain egalitarian approach today, which I don't know was always there in our country's history or our cultural history or even the family's history. But luckily, I think in my generation, at least, while there were still some societal murmurings, from an equity standpoint, it was quite equal, and it made life a lot easier in some very core business issues.
Okay, so one thing is coming out that while the Indian businesses have started giving the equity or ownership to the women folks, we still have a lot to do when it comes to getting them on a day-to-day activities of the businesses. We'll be discussing this part more. I've just got a note saying that Dr. Preeta needs to kind of have needs to move out quickly because there's some other emergency. So Dr. Preeta, just one question which I would want to ask you is challenges in attracting or retaining next generation within the family members in the family business, given that a lot of other opportunities are available. Something do you want to speak on, and maybe then I'll run through the regular stuff. But since you wanted to leave early, I just wanted to ask this question to you.
Thank you. Sorry, I do have to leave early because there's an Apollo board meeting going on. So there's some things which need to hit the news. So I stepped out for this. But having said that, talking about the next generation, I have great admiration for Lavanya because she's probably our kid's age. I know her dad very well. So, there is a huge shift in generation and she'd probably answer it much better than me. Having said that, I think the next gen, they respect the family business. They're excited about it, but they have some, phenomenal ideas. And given the space, given maybe some amount of capital backing, I think they would do very well in the existing businesses, which is, we have a core competency. But we all know that whichever business we're in, it's actually a large ecosystem. I'm talking healthcare, but the same comes from many other businesses. And they need to be given the space because they're all armed with great education, which none of us had. And they need to be given the space. We need to trust them. Sometimes what happens is G2, which is all of us, have grown up, I love saying with the sandwich generation. Because we grew up being, just working with our dads, trying to see that whatever is done is successful and nothing else mattered. But we learned as we went along about corporate governance, about shareholders' value, creating value, just being a large corporation and doing a whole bunch of things right. So we learned all that. And G3 has imbibed it because, they've grown with it. But they have the advantage of greater horizons, of blue skies, and for them to be able to succeed and to grow your existing business to larger ecosystems, I think we need to give them trust. We need to be able to invest in their dreams. We need to give them capital, but we need to organize their thoughts. You can't just say, okay, here's a bunch of capital, just go out there and do whatever you want. So there needs to be a certain amount of discipline, but discipline shouldn't be a fetter. It should fetter their thinking and their way of functioning. And I think that is what we're looking for. We're seeing, in our own system, some of the G3 being part of the business, some of them doing their own thing. And I think it's an exciting future for all of them. But large families need to learn to work together. They need to work within the framework. They need to work within the discipline, that trust, and just to be able to be monitored and to be accountable. More than anything else, you have to be accountable for family wealth. So I think these are the learnings for G3, and I really wish them the very best. And and for all the other panelists, it was really great being with all of you. And I wish I could have just spent more time, but I keep getting called out. So all the best and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Preeta. We'll let you go. We understand you have some other emergencies. Please. Good evening. Let's move on to our other panelist, Dr. Nupur. Dr. Nupur, you're an academician and have always been part of your family business. You come from a Marwari family background, a community which is seen to be running businesses successfully. I'm sure you would have both anecdotal as well as research-led information about how Indian family businesses have over the years morphed from a purely men-dominated arena to business run by women. In maybe 2 to 3 minutes, your perspective on how this changed and some examples if you want to share with us, please, Dr. Nupur.
Sure, thank you, Sanjay. I think Dr. Prieta, Lavanya, and Arjun have really set the stage, and a lot of the things that they mentioned about the way the glass ceiling, especially large families are not really worried about breaking the glass ceiling anymore. And earlier, it was more about invisibility of women or understanding the challenges that women face. So it was reflected in our research also, such challenges or such issues that women faced earlier. But gradually, we are seeing the shift even in the kind of topics that we are researching, that now the research is more about co-preneurship. It is about women making better CEOs or bringing in greater diversity in boardrooms or their leadership qualities. So it's more about equal rights of ownership of family businesses for daughters and wives. Now it is about acknowledging the value that they bring in through their social networks and social capital, even if they are not active in the business per se. So as Arjun said, that they have been taking one step forward towards bringing in greater equality in ownership now. So these are the kind of shifts that we see even in our research. But and there is no denying that there are demographic shifts that are happening all around us. I've noticed conversations in families shift from, should we send her to high school, to she must go to the US to get higher education if that's what she wants. And from why does she want to come to office, to she's more than capable compared to my son and must therefore lead. And these are all happening in a very short span of time, within a couple of decades, I would say. So a few factors which have contributed to such shifts are definitely smaller family sizes. So many of the families have just a daughter or 2 daughters, or just a son and a daughter, and they need all hands on board. And of course, there is increased awareness at the societal level, at the family level, as well as the individual levels. So that is definitely there. However, we cannot paint all families with the same color. So why I mentioned it very, very emphatically in my introduction, that I come from a small town, I come from a Marwari family, I come from a very traditional family. That's because I observe smaller businesses, I observe these communities very, very closely. And while Lavanya or Dr. Preeta or the next gen in the cycle group of companies, they are, and even I am, we are definitely more privileged or more endowed with the support of our family, but it's not the same across the country. And there are a lot of unconscious biases that remain even in families that talk about equality. So there are dining table conversations and family meetings where women are kept out. So it is almost setting them up for failure because it's a big disadvantage for them. They're left out of the informal knowledge dissemination or decision-making process. To add to it, there's also the unreasonable mental load on the women to manage the business along with the household chores. So very large businesses may not face a few of these challenges, but really most of these small and medium enterprises, women do face a lot of these unconscious biases, a lot of these challenges. They're still there, and there is a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that the difference or the experiences of women in rural versus urban, or not so rich versus the rich, joint families versus the nuclear families, or different castes and communities, small versus large businesses, industry, all of these play a role in different experiences of women. So what I would like to say is that we are definitely making a lot of progress, but it's unfortunately not disseminating at the rate that we would like it to. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nupur. The takeaway is that we still need to do a lot. Now,
Yes.
let me bring in some international perspective with this. David, culturally, things are different in other countries where women have been playing a proactive role in business for a much longer period when compared to India, of course. Your perspective from a global point of view and how women have fared in running family businesses, and does gender play a role in carrying forward the family business legacy? Any examples also, if you want to share, please do so. David?
Thank you, Sanjay, for inviting me to participate in such an extraordinary group. I have been doing work in family business for 53 years, and I don't want to pronounce too much, but I have learned a few things. And first of all, women are different managers than men. They are more inclusive, and they're more, I think, more flexible in their willingness to examine other issues. But what I can say as a generalization is that one of the most important things is that families must understand the boundary between the business of the family and the business of the business. And what has happened country after country is they mingle the two concepts, and that means that the business is used for inappropriate purposes in terms of having the developing child grow in certain ways, and that growth should take place elsewhere. So one of the things I learned early on is the importance of having a very clear career path as it relates to the family business. And the whole notion of a family business employment policy is really important because it spells out specifically what is required and how you meet those requirements. On my website is a family business employment policy that I developed many years ago, and it has stood the test of time in terms of it continues to be the gold standard in the industry. All of the right things are there in terms of education. For instance, in terms of entry into a business, we would look for people that would have increasing levels of responsibility and would have success in that over time. And so we want to assure that our children get that kind of profile, so they need to understand that that's what they need to build in order to be a full-fledged member in the family enterprise. I have a couple of examples. I've done a lot of work in Turkey, and there's a woman, her name is Güler Sabancı. Sabancı are some of the wealthiest people in Turkey, and she is the chairman of that entire collection. Wonderful example. Then there's another example in Germany, the Viega precision fittings business is 125 years old, and there's a young woman in her mid-30s who's being groomed to take over that company. And it'd be interesting if someone would want to look at the website for Viega, that can be easily be found, spelled V-I-E-G-A. And there's quite a bit of information about their orientation, and they're committed to a level. They make precision implements and fittings, and so they're very much committed to precision, not only in the product, but in terms of how they operate. So it has been an extraordinary run to work with families in business, and I'll pause there in the interest of others having their input.
Thanks, David. Now let me come back to the panelists who are actually running their business, Lavanya and Arjun. When it comes to diversification and seeking growth from newer pastures, how is the consultation process within the family? And do again, women of your family get to at least participate in it, have a voice or a say? And how does it play? How does your wife or your spouse or your aunts, your sisters play a role in that? Do they? Arjun, do you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely. Well, in our family, right from the time of my grandfather, my grandmother played a very pivotal role in the family as well. For us, our fragrance creation is one of the key differentiators, right? So the in-house formulations are all created either by my grandmother, and then my mother right now handles the entire production for us. So all the formula, she's the one who manages with my aunt. So they are an integral part of the business, of course, especially the incense business. And we are 5 of us cousins in the 3rd generation. And so each of us manage an independent business vertical. We are into avionics, we are into defense, we are into agri-tech, we do IoT devices, floral extracts and herbal extracts. So we have diversified quite significantly from the core business of incense and home care products. And women do play a very important role in the entire family staying together and the support that we get. And we derive tremendous confidence from that. And, to be honest, in our generation, if you look at the women in the family, we have 5 of us cousins who are managing the business, but each of the women, my wife is a practicing pediatrician. She heads a pediatric care unit in one of the hospitals. My other cousin's wife, Savita, she runs a fantastic outfit called Hobby Place. My brother's wife runs a very flourishing restaurant and bakery called Frosting. And Shruti, Pawan's wife, she runs a yoga clinic and a yoga store as well. So each of them are independent on their own. And Pooja, Kiran's wife, is fantastic with handicrafts, and she creates all of these products, and she also helps us in our production unit as well. So, for the family to sustain and perpetuate, women in our family especially have been independent and are very progressive in thought. And that's how we built our business. And to answer your question, diversification, for us, we've decided to diversify only if there is collective consensus. It's never on vote. All 5 of us, including the women, are part of the decisions that we take for the family, especially for the business. If all of us agree, then we invest. Even if one of us think it's not good, then we don't go ahead and do it. For us, family staying together is paramount, and then the business perpetuates from that.
So takeaway from your family is that, things move only if there's consensus. Thanks,
For sure.
Arjun. Lavanya, do you want to say something on the question that I asked?
Yes, actually that, and I do want to pick up the strand from the previous conversation as well, the one that you were having with Dr. Nupur. I'll come to that. But so to your immediate point, the business workings of our family is quite different actually from Mr. and we don't actually work by consensus. What we work quite similar to the values of business as well. There's entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial learning, right? As opposed to leadership learning or leadership training. Just frugality. It's very like it's a cash flow funded business. It's not a GMB or a growth oriented business. We don't care about the top line as much as we care about grow sustainably and with a very strong focus on the bottom line. Sustainably, because you don't want to have like a hot year once, but then you've done that by chipping away at the building blocks of your organization, or you've done that by borrowing from the future or by levering up your company to like some kind of an unsustainable level. So fairly fiscally prudent, frugal, entrepreneurship, apprentice based teaching learnings. If you see, none of these qualities have anything to do with gender, right? So this was how each of us were trained, and maybe because of the very high sort of entrepreneurial and autonomous nature of it, we don't do things by consensus. Each of us, when we had to enter the business, the family business, my granddad had to enter it before he was ready. He had to join when he was 11 years old because his father passed away suddenly. And he was the only boy and the youngest, and he had all elder sisters. And as was the custom back then in the 1940s, he was the man of the house, so to speak. And so he had to enter the family business. And from that very young age, he had the mantle and the responsibility on his shoulders to run the business, take care of all of his sisters, their weddings. This is 1940s, right? Right, his mother's health, also get married, grow his own family, all of that. Right? So when my father joined the business, I think he joined it, and he joined again in a very entrepreneurial way. And he built his own business unit. His own business unit ended up being very profitable in time. And then that took care of his own needs, his family, his growing family's growing economic needs, as well as whatever profits that business unit generated would go straight back into the business towards growth and expansion. So this cycle of frugality, taking out only what the business needs, put it back into the business, is a universal principle that we had at the family level. And so even though each generation joined, we joined with this indoctrinated belief that you have to make it on your own. Now, if you're able to make it, that's great. If you're not able to make it, that's fine. But there's no place in the family for you. None of this was actually a conversation or it wasn't easy, but it also wasn't hard. It was just extremely matter of fact. So when I joined the business, and then of course, like I said, it was seen as an indulgence, and then I went to the US and everything. And I don't think anybody really thought that I was going to actually come back into the family business. But when I did return 7 years later, it was very clear that I will only join if I'm going to have that autonomy. And I have a lot of belief in this e-commerce format. And so that's something that I'm going to start and establish. If that business breaks even by year 3 and starts generating profits towards the corpus for expansion, then I've created and I've earned a role in the business. If it doesn't, then I'm going to move on. As it happened, 3.5 years, so it took a little longer. We broke even, and then with the pandemic, we got a really big shot in the arm, for better or for worse. But the e-commerce unit is really thriving now. But like I said, there is not consensus. There is a understanding that we're all captains of our ship, and at the same time, we're custodians of certain common principles and common issues that at a company level we hold, right? So the use of the name, the branding, the marketing, those things still do happen through conversation. But we always push through that conversation. I think there's this concept of, and we're a very sort of direct, blunt family. So we really push for it in those conversations to say, okay, why, but why not? Where's the data for it? And on what is the underlying principles? But once you kick the tires on something, right? then you have to, as a group, come to commitment. We can't just disperse, each of us having our own opinions. So there are places where at the common themes, we are forced to commit and unify under one vision, but each of us are still captains of our own business unit. And there's a very strict, the only rule that there is, which is a profitability rule. You know, nothing is sort of a entitlement, nothing is kind of given to you, whether you're man or woman, you know, elder son, younger son, it doesn't matter. If you're able to take care of your own family's growing needs and add back to the corpus and add value, you know, you've earned your place in this ecosystem. And that's what it takes to earn a place in the business table. The other very quick one that I'll say, and this is probably a provocative question that I'm throwing out there, but something that Dr. Nupur said was quite interesting. And she was talking about the two Indias and how there is more and more equality, both at the societal level and at the business level for a certain economic strata. But that hasn't yet permeated to the hinterlands of India and to many parts of semi-urban rural India. My question is this. Now, when all the men folk were, and I'm simplifying it to make a point, right? So bear with me. Previously, when all the men folk were busy working, who was there taking care of the babies and taking care of the families and like all of the other, you know, like just taking care of life and everything else that needs to function? So it was women. So now when all of the men and the women are off busy doing that, who's there taking care of that? It still falls invisibly on the women of the country, because I guarantee that half, like if not 80% of us, both on this panel and those on listeners, if you're of that certain economic strata, I guarantee you have a domestic worker at home. It probably is a housemaid. She's probably coming in and doing a lot of heavy lifting so that you can go off there and do your work. So to me, true economic and gender and social liberty and equality is when women of all strata are freed up from having to do that. So from it being, okay, the wife saying, okay, let me take the load off of you. Now it is the maid or the nanny saying, let me take the load off of you, or the grandmother saying, let me take the load off of you. At what point is it going to be institutionalized support systems so that it doesn't have to be one section of society that has to step in and take the load off of each other? So that to me is really, I think, where I have hope that India would move towards.
Sanjay, let me.
Exactly. Please go ahead. I will invite you to do that.
I can't resist myself making a point here, adding to what Lavanya said. So Lavanya, you would agree with me that even though we perhaps are from a strata of society where we have household help and we ourselves don't really do much at home. And that's the reason I said that even the mental load. So we do have people helping us at home. Despite that, the mental load of ensuring that things at home are smooth still falls on women. And that is something very, very difficult to explain, because most of the time the answer that comes back is, but you have help. Yes, I have help, but if someone doesn't come, if the cook doesn't come, or if my daughter has a problem, it's always, or most of the time, it's a women who have to.
Completely agree. I mean, I think so the next time someone asks you that, and this is how I always reply to it, right? If you have a CMO and a CFO and a CEO, then what the heck do you need a CEO for? I mean, you've got them running the company. And the answer is, well, you still do need a CEO to sort of like make sure that things are running well, keeping an eye on the top line, keeping an eye on the bottom line, being there for any contingencies, taking care of the coordination. So there is actually a lot of work even in that. So completely agree to your point. There is a mental load there. And I wasn't meaning to say that women are equal in certain strata of society. I think there's different degrees of inequality, and point taken that this is a significant one, and I feel it too myself. But the point that I was trying to make is that when we talk about the hinterlands, right? The hinterlands of India is not really in the hinterlands. It's in our homes.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, well, a completely second view, and I don't want to sound any other way, but I've tried to support the family to the best of my ability, but I know my wife does a far better job than what I would. But I try to do whatever I can. That being said, I think the bigger challenge here is if you look at our organization, right? I mean, we have predominantly 80% women workforce. And they work day in and day out. They come into the office as well working, and they manage their families as well. And they're all dual income households. And going forward, the country is going to be driven by dual income households the way it is progressing. Let us not go up to the higher level strata and say, yeah, we are all privileged and we can have a maid to come and help. But when the minimum wage worker can actually have dual income households, why can't we as well manage? They figure out a way, and I think the structure that is required to support that, I completely agree with Lavanya, has to be created in organizations and by the country as well to encourage equality and equity across the board. And I think if a country can't take care of liberty of its people, then there's no purpose at all. Completely second that view, right? I mean, from a family business sustaining and perpetuating, I think that was one of the great things that we realized is that unless we show equality and equity, it's not going to percolate as a value system through the organization, and we've done that. On the other side of it, if you look at the way we have structured, when I meant consensus, I meant consensus in starting a new business. But each of us run our business verticals with 100% autonomy and the confidence that the family is backing us all the way. And profitability is not what we drive the business by. It's more about the family and the values. I guess each family runs in its own way. But as long as we continue to deliver value to the consumer and we see some level of improvement in what we're doing and we're satisfied with where we're going, we kind of manage to support each other. So I guess each family functions in a certain way, but I think it is a given, and I completely second what David is saying and Dr. Nupur, that for us, if we have to survive, we have to get the women in the family involved in the business right from get-go and figure out a way of how we can manage everything else. If not, the business won't survive and we will not progress. And that's a given, and that reality, I think, needs to occur to everybody across the board. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I agreed to be part of the Women in the Family Business Forum, even though we don't have our women in our family business yet, but they're an integral part of where we want to be going forward.
Hey, thanks both, actually all three of you, Nupur, Lavanya and Arjun, for taking this very impromptu, which now brings me to a very interesting point, and I would like to hear David on this. David, your views on inheritance versus right to work.
You are on mute, sir. You are on mute. You are on mute. Again, mute. Again.
You've gone back to mute.
Please keep me informed if I'm muted, okay? What I wanted to say is that the families that are most successful have clarity about their values, and those values are then reflected in the way the relationships take place in the family. I'm talking about the interpersonal relationships. If you say that you prize the independence of a family member but don't support it, then that's going to undermine any activities in the business. So I find families that first of all, as part of their coming together, they articulate what are their values and how do we expect those to be reflected in the business. A mission statement that starts out like, we are a family-owned business. Well, just saying that, family-owned, that says something that can be discussed. And we agreed to provide a predictable place of employment for our employees, and so then that can be discussed. What does that mean? So the whole idea is to, first of all, articulate the values and then be sure that those are being reflected in the relationships that take place between family members and those in the business. And it's very important that you actually vote with your feet, meaning you are what you say you are. If you say that you are doing something in your family business in your mission statement, you better be doing it in your relationships with family members. So with that as a backdrop, it's really important to understand there's a difference between the business of the family and the business of the business. The business of the family is to nurture its family members and support them as they go through life. The business of the business is to generate profits and to produce a viable product and also a predictable place of employment. And so what happens is that so many families get tangled up by trying to do the business of the family and the business in one vehicle. And so it's important to separate. So to actually have a session where we're only going to focus on family matters. And of course, this issue about who takes care of who. I personally changed as many diapers as my wife and the mother of my children changed. And so who's going to change the diapers gets discussed in the family business part, not in the business part. So having that and being very deliberate about deliberate about separating those two is very important. I can't stress enough how I often get asked, what are the three most important things in family business? I say, well, first there's boundaries, and then there's boundaries, and then third is boundaries. Because if you don't have proper boundaries about all of these matters, you'll be in trouble. I don't know if I answered the question or not.
Okay, we're getting it, no issues. Arjun, again talking about inheritance and everything. Selling incenses is not a very glamorous profession, maybe for the Generation Z and Generation Alpha. Given the current onslaught of all those, the tech companies coming up, people willing to pour money, giving you money to burn, how do you think you will be able to attract the next generation within your family to do this not so glamorous business and keep this legacy going? And the new guys could come up with new ideas, there'll be people to fund them, your family could fund them, they could raise money, but still then what happens to your family business?
Yeah, like my father before me and my mother for that matter, it is my responsibility and my wife's responsibility to show the opportunity to my son and the daughters in the family that this business is worth running and they can make a future out of it. That being said, the responsibility of ensuring that the business sustains and perpetuates with or without the family, I think, is the responsibility of the family board as one. And we've reached a size and scale where it should be just consequential that somebody from the family comes and continues and perpetuates the business part of it. Sustaining the family, ensuring that everybody stays together in the fourth generation, I think that is the bigger goal for us to begin with. Because it's just not an agarbatti company, right? We're in the business of providing hope. Each and every mother out there, when she leaves the house, prays for the well-being of her kids and the family. Any company right here starts with 2 agarbatti sticks being lit and a prayer being offered to God, and that is perpetual. We are in a deeper we kind of solve a deeper emotive requirement than anything else out there. And as a business, we've diversified quite heavily, and there is opportunity, Amak, in the family business itself, to continue. But to answer your question, when I was in 8th standard, my summer vacation, I would go with my father to the sales team, and we did van sales in Kerala selling new products. And I sat in the van with him and went door to door selling agarbatti. I can't give the same level of learning to my son, but I'm trying to do whatever best I can, and the daughters as well. I'm giving them the exposure to see the opportunities that exist in managing and running their own business. Now, there are 30,000 families connected to our business alone, right? And each and every day I wake up knowing that every decision I take affects all these 30,000 people and their families. But then again, I know that whatever decisions I take, these 30,000 families will support my decision and go all out to back me. So showing the opportunity, showing the horizon, convincing our kids that working for a Google or whatever else then working for yourself and your family is better. I think it's left to this generation to give that opportunity to the next generation and equip them with everything possible.
Thank you, Arjun. Lavanya, do you have similar challenges, or do you think the next generation in your family will anyway get attracted because you're pushing lines more?
So I think I echo a little bit what David had said earlier, that I think there are two parts of the family, right? There's the family part of the family, and then there's the business part of the family business. And these are two independent processes. Now, in typical sort of corporates, typical businesses, there is only the business side of things. You have a board, you've got governance structures, you've got the management heads, you've got the business processes, you've got what's strategic and in the ops, you've got what's governance and sort of not purely in the ops. But what do you do when your colleague or your boss or your direct report also happens to be your brother or your son or your cousin, right? That's when some of these roles will come into conflict. What you would like to do for your son out of a sense of duty as a father may come in conflict with what you would need to do for someone who may need a little more guidance or is not performing as much. So I think it's very, very important to keep the roles a little bit clear, to understand when is it that you're now acting in the capacity of a family member, when is it that you're acting in the capacity of someone who has a business and a professional relationship with that person. And there's a lot of literature on this, and there's a lot of ways in this where I think there's a lot of research on this where we know there's some things that work well. It's hard to do that switching on an everyday basis. But it is easier to have structured moments where you can say, you know what, every year we take a family retreat where we bring in all of the members who are part of the family, and then the family decides, is that all of the members who are part of the family, but who have equity in it, or only members of the family, but not the management side of it, right? So you can decide and have these vehicles and these channels, which are quite warm and open and frequent, so that people are able to have that free flow of communication and bonding, and they can understand. Right? There's a lot of research on that in terms of like how you can do it. For me, and to more directly to the question that you asked about the next generation, like I said, I'm in my 30s. The next gen is very young. My son is 4. My brother doesn't have any kids yet. But I think echoing what what Ms. Preeta Reddy said a little earlier, it's a very different world. It's been a very different world. I think in India, every 5 years is like a generational shift. So the world that I entered into at 2005 is very different from the world that people are entering into at 2022. And I think the most that I can do is probably to say, okay, what are my duties? Clarify for myself, what are my duties as a mother or as a parent? And then what are my duties as a custodian of the brand? What are my duties as like someone who is currently in the fairly ops role of the brand? What are my duties as someone who has equity in the business and who has to think about wealth preservation, management, growth opportunities, and ensuring the longevity of the of the business? Because even in the business, depending on different stages of life, sometimes people just become a little more risk averse as they age, and then they just want to conserve wealth. Whereas like someone who's a younger generation who's entering the family may want to go for like high growth, high risk, high reward kind of opportunities. So there's a whole bunch of ways to deal with this beyond just the aspect of do we prime the youth or do we prime the next generation to come in? But I think the answer to that really stems from what I was saying. You've got to think about what is it that you want. When you think about next generation, you have 2 roles, that of the family member and that as the person in the business. What do you want from each of that? What is your outcome? And then basis that, how do you want to set it up? So from a member of a business family or a member of a family in business, thinking about it from a business standpoint, the things that I wish I had looking back, and therefore I would like to create for the next generation, is a very clear set of rules to say, what does it take to be part of the business? Do we expect you to have outside experience, for example? Do we expect you to have hit certain milestones before we feel that you would be ready to take on a business unit? Are we going to make some kind of a 2-year or a 1-year rotational leadership program available to you? How is it that should you choose to enter the family business, these are the support structures that we create for you, and then these are the expectations that we have of you? And I think those are the conversations to be had at any level, and ideally well before the children come into the business.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I think we've reached that point of our seminar where I think we should now open up our chat rooms for general viewers to ask any questions they feel. So I would request the organizers to kind of, unmute the spectators or the viewers to see if they can ask any specific questions to the panelists. And when you're asking, please be brief and also say who you're asking so it's easier for the person to answer.
My question is to Ms. Lavanya. I am Suresh, President, Hindustan Chamber of Commerce. What was your USP to get into the business? That is one. Second, I know that you are very high in innovative ideas and thoughts. How it was accepted, or what kind of efforts you made to accept those innovative ideas by your early generation people? Because that was the main thing for starting your career, These two questions only I want to ask.
Got it. So the first one, I didn't have a USP. I think I just, I was 21 when I joined. So I was quite young, right? So, and 2005 is very different. So I just joined and I said, okay, let's see what will happen. And if I have fun and I enjoy it, I'll do it. At 21, this was the only business environment that I had seen at that point in time. This was pre-McKinsey, pre-HBS, pre-Myntra. So I had nothing else to benchmark it to. Whatever it is, you have to make it successful and enjoyable and fruitful, both for the organization as well as yourself. So I think I just came in with that mindset that I know I don't know much because I wasn't a textile designer. I didn't have a textile background. I was a computer engineer. I didn't have a business background. So I had to learn on the job. And so I came in with that curiosity to say, okay, let's see what we can do with this. In terms of how do you make your ideas get accepted, I would turn that a different way because I think this is what I learned. I never really cared about I had points of view, but I think when I came in, it was more about just understanding the different motivations of people, right? So let's say I see something, even an idea, you have a reason to have a certain idea. So I would see something and then I'd say, okay, look, I feel like we're doing a very good job with a certain age demographic, but not such a good job with a different kind of demographic. And then I would get, like I said, we're a very, very direct family. And that's true even with the leadership levels. So with the people who were not really part of the family, but were part of the business, but they out-tenured me, right? At that point, I was only 1 or 2 years in the business, even if I had family ties. But they had about 15 years of experience already within the organization. So they'd say, okay, fine. Oh, what makes you think that? So then that pushed me to say, okay, I have to make a case. I can't just be like, okay, I think this. Here's what I see. Here's what I see the footfalls. Here's what I see in terms of percentage of footfalls. How many of them come from this age demographic? How many from the other? I saw this at the other store. So geographically also, I'm starting to see a trend. So this is the data that I see. Then they're like, okay, fine. So you see this data. Okay, great. So what do you want to do about it? Why do you think it's a problem? So the more that people keep pushing, the more that I would start, it pushed me to refine my thought process. So it became more of than just saying, hey, look, I observed this. I want to help. I want to support. Maybe this will be helpful. It was more of, yeah, okay. So what and now what? And then I had to say, okay, right. So if I'm the only one who really sees this and thinks that this thing matters, then I should be the one to do something about it. And so that really motivated me to start my new initiatives and work initiatives and sub-ventures and things like that, all within the umbrella of Maggie.
Thank you.
Okay, there is one question coming from Devang. his question is, if a second generation family member wishes to start something of his own, and again, using the resources, not of his or his, but of the family resources, how does this need to be dealt with? How does this need to be evaluated? So again, he didn't say who he's addressing this to. So maybe Arjun, do you want to kind of, I think we need to unmute Arjun. Arjun is not able to unmute himself. Organizers, can you please help him?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know. I was muted all this while. I didn't realize. So.
Okay.
I think even I would be more interested in listening to Lavanya either way. Understanding.
So,
right.
So
yeah,
Arjun,
no,
the question was.
Yeah. No, I saw the question, and I think the person has said the question is for Lavanya, not for me. So they put that in the comment as well.
Okay, sorry, I didn't notice that. Okay, but okay, anyway, if you want to give a shot before we go to Lavanya.
Yeah, no, actually, it's another question, I think. So, yeah, coming to this, definitely, if there's a new business opportunity and if the family is together collectively and there's autonomous given for a individual within a generation to start that business, but the family collectively invests in it, then it should definitely be encouraged, and that should be the approach. Many families falter because the person who comes in says, I need the funding from the family, but I want more. He or she says, I want more because I'm putting in all the effort. So that's when things actually don't go forward as a family business. So I'm a believer in equity and equality, and each one puts the effort to their best of their ability. It is not a performance indicator. It's family first for me always. And as long as each of us keep contributing equally to the betterment of the family and the business, nothing else should matter. But each business functions in a different way. Each family has their own methods where they reward performance in a different way. But my take is, as long as the family is collectively together, it's inconsequential of who gets the credit for it, as long as you have the autonomy to take the decisions and run the business the way you want. And that's my 2 bits.
Thanks, Arjun. That is the other question. I would give this both to Lavanya and to Dr. Nupur. What is the best way to overcome self-doubt as a woman in a male-dominated family business? And did you face anything similar like this? I think this is more for Lavanya, but Dr. Nupur, if you want to give in from your experience and from your research. Oh, wait, is Dr. Nupur also not able to unmute herself? Okay, organizers, can you please help Dr. Nupur?
Yeah,
yep.
Done, sir.
All right, Lavanya, please go first. I'll answer it later.
Got it. Okay.
Please unmute Lavanya also, please.
Okay, can you all hear me now? All right. So on the topic of, so have I experienced self-doubt? Yes, 100%, probably 10 times a day. What do I do about it in a male-dominated world? I don't do anything about it. I just carry on. I mean, it's flippant, but it's true. It's, it's true of anything, right? Like we could ask men the same question. And this is not to minimize or take anything away from what women face in a male-dominated business environment. It is very difficult, whether in a family business or elsewhere. But without minimizing it, like you could turn this and say, for somebody who is not of the majority, right? Somebody who is not of the majority religion, somebody who is not of the sort of upper middle class social strata, somebody who is not of, or someone who is just say a first son family, the first son in a family business. How do you deal with the pressure when all of your other friends can go away and study to their talents and do what they want? And the broader question that I'd say is, we don't have control over the cards that life deals us. We're given the cards that we're given. There's always gifts in every scenario. I think that if you're part of a family business, it is a massive gift and it is a big platform. It does come with certain trappings. And in the end of the day, it's a matter of perspective. There will always be things in any situation that is going to be hard. I just try, because it's in my personality, not to look at it too much, because I look at all of the other stuff, which is equally hard or challenging, but I feel that I can overcome this. Self-doubt, it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes. You can't do anything about it. It becomes part of life.
So I'll just add to what Lavanya said. In fact, of course, I've faced it many times too, and sometimes I don't do anything, but sometimes I make it a point to subtly call it out, because I realize that a lot of times the statements that are made, they are really not to hurt me, or it's not a conscious bias. Sometimes it's just unconscious, and people just don't realize it. For example, I get to hear things like, I buy a new car and I get to hear, "Aapko kya hai, madam, aapke husband to CEO hai." So it's as though, I can't buy a car on my own, or you do well in your career because your husband supports you. I mean, these are things that people won't really tell a man, right? I mean, you're doing well because your wife is supporting you, or you bought a car because your wife earns well. So these are things that really undermine our own achievements, our own hard work. And sometimes I just subtly call them out, because I really think that these men they're not trying to hurt me. They are just not aware of what they are doing many a times. So that's that. And another thing that I feel is that in this journey towards equality, it's not just our struggle or our war, right? Men have to equally participate in it. We cannot have an equal world in which it's only women. I generally see, for example, Indra Nooyi's book, My Life in Full. So I actually asked a couple of my colleagues to read it, and I realized that none of my men colleagues were really interested in reading it, but it's all the women who are reading it. So we already know those challenges. We know what's happening. It's the men who need to realize what's happening and then participate equally in this process of gender equality. And really, most of India now, or a lot of India now, we are educating our girl child, and women are very well educated now. But I always say this, that educating a girl child is like giving her wings, but then not supporting her the way the men are supported. Where working and earning is their most important job, or perhaps that's the only job most of the time. So not really supporting the women to give her best is like not giving her the sky to fly despite the wings. So we really all of us have to be in this together. It's not just women's fight. Men also have to participate equally.
Well said, Dr. Nupur. I think while I see some more questions, no, I don't see questions, of just comments coming in. So I think, thank you, everyone. We've reached that part of the program where we need to stop now and kind of, get out of this, because that's what we budgeted for. So I give back to the organizers.
I would like to call Dr. Gauri Ramachandran to give vote of thanks. Unmute yourself, please. Chitra, please unmute her.
Hello?
Unmute Dr. Gauri's.
Dr. Gauri's, okay, 1 minute.
Yeah, please. Be able to do that?
Actually, she can.
Yes.
Did it, sir.
Please,
Did it.
go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening to all of you. It was a wonderful session. The time flew off like anything. It was a fantastic insights. We got it from each one of the panel. The galaxy of speakers were so well organized. Thanks to Surana and Co. and our President Suresh Krishnamurthy. So the essence of every speaker is such that there's a passion flowing overwhelmingly. Then the business comes. Then there is the equality. Then there is the way the shareholding is given to the women, the inheritance spoken by Mr. Arjun. And Dr. Nupur's insight was way beyond things. And it was so well, she pocketed in the 4 factors in the beginning. It was the awareness Really, it is an eye-opener for everybody. And Dr. David Boak, my goodness, the kind of a books he has written, I think we need a lifetime to read it, to understand and do things. It is indeed a fortune to have this session today evening with all these wonderful speakers, an inspirational journey forward. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. Thanks to Surana and Company and to Hindustan Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you, sirs, for participating in this panel. Thank you, Mr. Sanjay. Thank you.
It was a pleasure hosting you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nupurji. Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for all of you.